Well, hello, everyone. This is Mike from the Franchise Business Podcast, and I'm pleased today to be joined by Lance Graulich. And Lance, you did correct me because I said it wrong when we were having a conversation before clicking record. So, Lance, I'll let you introduce yourself, tell people what you do, and a little bit of background on who you are as a person.
Thank you, Mike, for having me. So I got into franchising pretty young and thought I was going to work on Wall Street for the family business. And I did for a period of time, got my economics degree. Dad had interests in restaurants. And that's what I fell into. Got a call from a crazy uncle in Arizona and said, I heard you're bored on Wall Street. Come build a $1 billion company with me. And this was 1989, Mike. And I was like, $1 billion company? We got to 225 million. And that got me to the West Coast. It was 1996 at that point. And had a couple little jobs, but for the most part, dove headfirst into the world of franchising. I owned franchises like Wingstop, Krispy Kreme Donuts. I even created my own brands, a now famous brand based in Las Vegas called Pink Box Donuts.
Okay.
Home of the gourmet donut and the fat Elvis. And when I thought I was going to retire and do nothing, but who can do nothing? I mean, there's only so much travel you can do, right?
Right.
I ended up becoming a franchise broker consultant. Didn't even really know what that was. Started it many years ago, part-time. Found FranServe in 2019, joined that brokerage. I'm a trainer for FranServe. And I love it. I love changing people's lives and helping people get into business ownership.
Fantastic, Lance. Well, you kind of bring a bit of a unique perspective, I think, with your extensive background in franchising. I imagine that's a valuable asset as you're speaking with people that probably have no clue what this world really looks like, and you're helping them evaluate their future. So,
yeah, I absolutely love it. And most of my clientele are first-time business owners, or they tend to be more high net worth individuals that already had a business or two and are looking for something maybe for the family that's a sure thing.
Sure. Awesome. And on that note, Lance, I mean, I think an important part of your role is understanding, each individual's goals and skills and financial, needs and then dreams as well. So what is your process for kind of evaluating those things before you start actually recommending options for that candidate to consider moving forward?
Mike, you ever watch that show, The Bachelor or Bachelorette?
Unfortunately, my wife has made me watch those multiple times.
Absolutely. And, when they talk about being vulnerable, knock down your walls, tell me how you feel, tell me what you want. In a way, that's what I'm doing. So I want people to tell me the truth. Some people do put up walls, especially in the first call, because the trust and rapport hasn't officially been built. And fortunately for me, most of my leads come to me these days through referrals, through either friends or my network or my podcast or my new show, Franchise Road Trip, where I actually go to franchises and check them out.
Sure.
So it really, for me, starts with that. But within that, I weave in what I call their what. What is their investment? Because that is very important. It's like shopping for a house. So you're looking for a $3 million house or a $300,000 condo. Similar for a business. What will be your role? Are you going to be full-time in the business? Are you going to be part-time in the business? Because as you know, there are people that want to keep their job. And by the way, that is very possible. You can keep your job and be successful in a business. A lot of that depends on you. Also, what brand you select. And that's, again, where I come in to steer people on this journey. What are your skills? It depends on what your skills are, as I just mentioned, as to what brand is best for you. So that's a quick little peek under the hood on that.
Sure. Absolutely. And then at that point, Lance, once you learn that and once you get people to open up those walls and give you background and again, open up about their dreams and goals as well, I think a really valuable asset that you provide is there's hundreds, really thousands of different franchise models across different industries. And I think, we'll get to this later on, but maybe people have some misconceptions that it's just food and restaurants. But I think the asset you have is you can evaluate these models. and then kind of distill that to something, digestible for these people that's not too overwhelming. So what
Yeah.
is your process about, again, thinking about what's the right model now that I
Yeah.
know who you are as a person and what your goals are?
Yeah, once I learn about the individual, a lot of people ask me, well, what is my criteria for selecting these brands? And a lot of it for me is the number one, the financial model. What does it look like? What is this brand's proven history? What do other franchisees say? A lot of people don't understand because they've never investigated franchising and that process. The best franchises have the best validation. There is a part in the process called validation where prospects have the opportunity to speak to existing franchisees about their experience. And that's where you really know there's a cultural fit. Are there people like you in this system that didn't know anything about this particular business, but maybe had those skills I was mentioning earlier? And now they realize they fit and they can, be successful in this brand like the folks that they've spoken to before them. Like joining a fraternity or a sorority, that whole idea of rush week for those that have pledged or rushed, I should say, you remember that, hey, these are cool people. This is where I want to hang out. And you know what, Mike? Franchising is like joining a mastermind. For years, people have given a lot of money, successful people generally that have already started their journey and have been successful and want to get to the next level. The idea of a mastermind is you're joining other successful people, rubbing elbows with others, sharing ideas to grow and scale a business or your life. And that's really what joining a franchise is. There's so much collaboration, and you're working with people that are doing the exact same thing as you, and you're not competition like in some masterminds. These people aren't your competition. A rising tide raises all ships, and you get to be part of that ocean, so to speak.
Yeah, 100%. I think a good franchise model should have franchisees that want to help each other out because, like you said, the organization's growth as a whole is good for each individual involved. So
Yeah.
you're 100% right.
Let me add to that. So I mentioned the number one is really the financial model. Is it proven? And are the processes in place or the processes in place to make sure people have a system to follow and a true blueprint or a playbook? The reality is after that, it's really about the leadership of the brand and what that looks like. And then it's also the niche. Is it just another painting business? There's nothing wrong with that. However, a lot of people say there's so much competition. Well, you don't really know that. You just see a lot of painting trucks passing your house because you're focused on that. Your RAS is in tune to that. But the reality is there might be plenty of business for everyone. And that, again, you discover through validation based on financial performance of franchisees. But those are a couple of the highlights. What does that financial model look like? Is it equipped to handle a semi-involved, semi-absentee type owner if that's what model you're choosing for you? What does the leadership look like? And again, the overall validation.
Sure, absolutely. I'm interested to get your take on this, Lance. I think sometimes people have a misconception that thing needs to be my interest if it's going to be a business that I get involved in. But I kind of have a perspective of you should be passionate about building a business, and then all of these models you can be successful, and it's just finding the right fit that we've talked about. So, how do you help people kind of overcome that thought of I like sports, so it needs to be a business related to sports, where, hey, maybe you just like to build a business and any of these models might work for you, as long as it's the right fit.
The first call. Yeah. That's how I do it, because you have to get people on your page right away and set the right expectations, starting with the breaking down the walls, breaking down those misconceptions. Because you're right. People come to me and say, I really like kids. I used to be a teacher, but this, that, and I decided I wanted to make money instead. Well, the reality is I might not put you in a kid related franchise just because you like kids. One of my favorite stories is a friend that owned 19 Great Clips hair salons. He was bald and didn't know how to cut hair. So logically, when he was presented the idea with Great Clips initially, he hated it. And it took him weeks to really get into the fact that, well, part of my what was that I was going to do a $200,000 SBA loan, put down my 20%, and hopefully I'd have like a 2.5 year ROI, return on investment, to get my money back. And Great Clips actually fit that for him. And years later, he had 19 locations. 15 years later, a lot of acquisitions of existing franchisees that didn't follow the model. And he built quite a few new stores and had an incredible run, handed it to really his family within 5 years. And, $1.5 million cash flow is pretty impressive on a bunch of businesses you knew nothing about. So what I talk to people about is you're free to do whatever you wish in this life, which is why we are talking. Notice I didn't say financial freedom, because freedom has a dumb at the end. I like to talk about free do.
There we go.
You are free to do. Write your own schedule. You are free to make as much money as you'd like. And that business is a means to an end. If you really love kids that much, then set up some sort of foundation and donate money to kids.
Sure.
Help kids in any way you want with the profits of your business. Set up a 501c3 to support them. But I just had a lady get into an electrical business. She thought she wanted senior care, home care, but it turned out we got her into a Mr. Electric franchise. And she was a little bit mad at me in between because, I was really pushing her and testing her, and I said, continue the conversations in home care. You might like this until you cross it off your list. And she goes, no, I'm going to move to Mr. Electric. Great. Both are fantastic for you, which is why I presented it. And those are two completely different models. You're working with seniors and you're an electrician. Well, she's not going to be an electrician.
Right.
She's going to build and grow an electrical franchise.
Yeah.
And that's what she just did.
Yeah. And that's the point. I think the perspective of the franchisor as well, which is we're not looking for someone that is passionate about that thing. We're looking for someone that can hire and manage people well and follow a system and, handle a profit and loss sheet. That's the ideal franchisee. We'll teach the rest. Right.
And Mike, let me tell you, one of the things the audience might be shocked to hear. My favorite electrical franchise, my favorite air conditioning franchise, my favorite plumbing franchise, all have one thing in common. They all love to get people like Mike to be franchisees.
Sure.
Because if anybody out there has read the book, The E-Myth is an amazing book, The Entrepreneurial Myth. And Michael Gerber in the book talked all about the components of what it takes to be a business owner. And technicians, so let's say you were a plumber and you hated all your bosses, but you might be a great plumber. When you get into your own business, essentially you might have some walls to break down and some bad habits to break,
right?
Because you still have to learn how to manage people effectively and build a culture in your company to grow and scale something, which is why a lot of people become Chuck in a truck or Stan in a van and never outgrow that 1 or 2 person operation, because that's their comfort level. Right. And guess what? That's fine for some people because they'll make more money doing that than they will as being a W-2 plumber in that example.
Sure. 100%. Yeah, no, I completely agree, Lance. So I think some of those stories you shared, a good segue to, I'm sure you've dealt with some people that were challenging in the process, and there's nothing wrong with a challenging client,
never.
Right? No, never, ever. But theoretically, if you had, do you have any stories about someone that it was really, really hard to evaluate them and find their, get them to open up and then find the right model for them, but you did it and they've been very successful in that business that they're in, or maybe have sold out of?
Yeah, this happens quite often, and it comes with me asking the right questions and really pushing the right buttons in a positive way to get people to open up. And again, it all starts with trust, because people don't want to tell me everything unless they feel that they can trust me, and I'm going to show them something that works. I was talking to a gentleman, and he was incredibly challenging in the first call, very unique from others in that he didn't even want to hear what I was presenting to him that day. We were just continuing to evolve the conversation, talking about him, because that's what this conversation's about. It's about the individual I am helping find this business. Sometimes people ask me questions. Well, based on your background, what do you think of this? And again, it's still about them. And he didn't want to hear about any other businesses. And it was really bizarre because usually I'll present 4 or 5 businesses in the first presentation call. And not always is that their business in that pile. The feedback that I get from them is tremendous to get to the next call. And hopefully I nail it there. Some people are just not ready and need to. I always tell people, well, I'm going to give you great foundational knowledge. It's like me being a dating coach if you want to get married. Well, where does the magic really happen in that process? When you actually go out on dates. So talking to the brands is like going out on the date. So I want them to go on as many dates as possible for them to feel comfortable, not only about the process, the buzzwords. A guy called me the other day. What is liquidated damages? I just learned about that, which is something in franchise agreements. So people learn different things at different stages. And I am coaching people along the way. But this gentleman in LA was incredibly difficult in that I couldn't even give him specific brands. He didn't really want to hear it yet. And then finally I blurted out roofing. And I gave him a brand called Best Choice Roofing. He kept talking about how he wanted something to be recession proof and which there's a lot of franchise brands that I consider recession friendly or recession proof.
Sure.
But he really just wanted to know what my favorite brand is, where he's definitely going to make money. And I always tell people, according to this disclosure document, I love this brand and how much money these franchisees can make. And I told him, the average franchisee at that brand at the time did like $4 million in revenue on this small investment. He goes, that's what I want. They weren't even registered to do any business in California at the time where he is. So he goes, I'll wait. That's it. So you don't want to talk to any other brands.
Right.
You're going to wait. And guess what? As soon as the registration opened within 6 weeks, he was introduced. I introduced him to the brand. He bought 3 or 4 territories. I don't remember. It was last year.
Right.
And he was off and running and successful. And oh, by the way, that franchise is no longer franchising. They got bought by a private equity group. And they determined the same thing he did. There's a lot of money to be made in this industry.
Sure.
We're not going to franchise anymore. We're just going to do it all ourselves.
Right.
So he got in just in time.
Okay. Awesome. But I mean, it's good that you overcame some of those challenges and found the right fit, and he's been successful. So that's the goal, right, with you. And then on the topic of particular stories, is there any other success story that you'd want to share, Lance, about someone that
I have a great one.
Okay, go ahead. Fire away.
I have many, but one that just popped into my head.
Yeah.
So my fraternity, we have about 16,000 brothers in a Facebook group.
Okay.
And there are a couple other franchise guys, but I guess I've become known as the franchise guy. Maybe I'm older than most of them.
Experience. We'll say
experience.
That. Yeah.
So a fraternity brother came to me, much younger than me. I don't know him in California. He went through my process. He and his wife are fantastic. And I said, I think you should look at home care for all the reasons that you're telling me what you're looking for. You should look at a senior care, non-medical home care brand. And they ended up joining Home Helpers. Now, you're only allowed to purchase 1 territory with Home Helpers. Some franchise, they'll let you purchase many, but they really want to make sure that you do a great job. You hit those numbers, and at your 1-year anniversary, you can have a second territory if you'd like. Mm-hmm. So he joins. Within 4 months, and he and I are talking. Within 4 months, he calls me, he goes, I love this. I'm crushing it. In case you haven't heard, I'm like far beyond where I should be. He goes, I really want another territory. So the short version is that I have a good relationship with Home Helpers, and they did sell him a second territory by the time he hit his 6-month mark, which really doesn't happen.
Yeah.
And because he was so successful, and at the annual convention in Las Vegas, he won an award, and his wife, that no first-year franchisee has ever won for his ramp-up period and his success.
Right.
So he is probably my number 1 referral source from any other individual. I mean, in different groups, I get a lot of referrals, but as a solo individual, he refers me more business every month without fail. I get 1 to 4 referrals from him, friends or business associates. So love the guy.
That's awesome. I imagine that is very fulfilling for you, Lance, and rewarding that you're able to help someone like that, find their perfect fit and something that they love and are successful in. I mean, I imagine that drives you in your role.
It is an amazing feeling, and I absolutely love doing it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Now, I know in this world, and we talked a little bit about it. There's misconceptions about franchising, and I'm sure those come up in your conversations with clients. What are some of the top misconceptions, and what do you do to address those things to help someone maybe stop thinking in an incorrect way and start thinking in a real, appropriate way?
Top misconception about franchising: you have to be a millionaire. Well, not every franchise is like a McDonald's or a Wendy's or a Burger King. So the reality is, no, you do not have to be a millionaire. My average deal is probably $200,000, and you can get an SBA loan. So really, you only need 40,000 cash and some working capital. And as long as you have a 680 credit score, probably going to get you an SBA loan. So misconception number one is money. You don't have to be a millionaire. Misconception number two, you don't have to quit your job. There are franchises that are side gigs. Schoolie Mitchell, for example. If you have a sales background, now I know a lot of people that join Schoolie Mitchell that don't have a strong sales background. They just are good at, good interpersonal skills, good communicator. But if you're in a sales job and you have the ability to do something on the side, I think Schoolie Mitchell would be amazing as a side gig, because you already have relationships built, and you can essentially talk to people anywhere. You have existing relationships with Schoolie Mitchell. You don't really have a border in that sense.
Right.
So that's misconception number two. You do not have to quit your day job. It really depends on your skills. And I already mentioned how much franchises, the investment, the skill set, and then also what categories there actually are besides food. People wouldn't realize, they don't even know what senior care is unless they've had, unfortunately, both my parents are gone, and I know what senior care is, but there's more young people. That's another misconception, is age. Many years ago, Mike, it was a 50-year-old guy that was buying a franchise, getting out of his corporate job that he was in for 30 years. Nowadays, I'm working with more women than ever and more people that are younger. I just got a franchise that's 29 years old.
Right.
29, young guy. A lot of people in their 30s I'm working with these days. So those are some examples.
100%. I think as the perception of corporate, life changes, I think more people are open to the idea of business ownership earlier in their lives, because that situation my parents had, where you stay at the same company for 35 years and they treat you well and then you retire in a good place. That's just not really the reality for a lot of people now, right? So that changes our lives in this world. So,
I just thought of one more. Can I throw in one more misconception?
Absolutely.
Another misconception about franchising: you can't make any money in a franchise because of the royalty fees and the marketing fees and the brand development fees. And the reality is, the item 19 within that franchise disclosure document is going to show you average revenue. I could tell you that a home care brand, I know the top franchisee in particular, did $25 million last year. And I know the average franchisee in a lot of home care brands, as an example, are doing 1.7 million in revenue on a light investment that's typically 150,000, and the margins are good. So it's BS that you can't make money in a franchise.
100%. Totally agree. And Lance, my last question before I kind of leave the floor open to you is, and this is a big question, what makes a good franchisee? I'm sure that's a question people ask you as you have conversations with them, is what makes somebody successful as a franchisee? So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, on my podcast, we talk about this almost every episode.
Right.
Number one, someone that's willing to follow the system. Sounds crazy, but people, it's like a marriage. There's subtle compromises that have to happen in a marriage to be successful. Well, in a franchise, The entire system is laid out. If you don't like it and you don't believe in it, don't join the franchise. The whole idea of the validation process is when you speak to franchise owners, I always tell people, talk to the most successful franchise owners so you can hear how they did it and believe that it's for you. When I was at Wingstop, I was on the validation list. I talked so many people out of joining Wingstop because I heard a lot of things they were thinking. And I was like, no, you don't have to think. You're following this system. They're going to approve the real estate you're building this business, and you're going to hire the people, but everything else is thought of for you. So that's a reality there. I forgot the question now.
Oh, what makes a good franchisee? But I mean, that's
what
a good
makes
answer.
a good franchisee?
Yeah.
Sorry, Mike. So number
you're good.
one, follow the system.
Yeah.
Number two, somebody that pays attention to the business as well. So let's say you're following the system, great. But the reality is you need to make sure that you're working hard and paying attention to the business. You know, there are two different franchisor friends of mine I spoke to recently, and they both told me the same thing. Their least successful people, there's always a bottom in every franchise, whether it's Schoolie Mitchell, McDonald's, Voda, Rolling Suds, there's always a bottom. And the reality is those people tend to be home during the workday, relaxing. I don't know if they're eating bonbons and watching TV, but the reality is who's going to work hard? I worked very hard in my franchises. I was involved to the point where I didn't have to be involved. The business worked as good without me. And that was then an indicator of how I was as an owner. So the reality is the secret ingredient that's not so secret is hard work.
Yes.
The third piece of that is truly being a good leader and knowing that you have to build a great culture. So there are some people that for whatever reason either can't or won't. And that's problematic. And then the last piece is if somebody comes in undercapitalized, it's kind of a death sentence, because if you have no opportunity, if you only truly have one shot, and I always tell people, think like you have one shot, even though you do have some extra cash.
Right.
You know, you got to have a safety net, and cash is king. And if you have extra capital, you ever see that meme of the miner that's got the big pickaxe and he's underground and he's digging and digging,
right?
And you could tell he's exhausted. But if he probably swung the axe one or two more times, there was gold. There was this much space between him and gold. That's exactly how franchising could be. It's like you got to work hard and then you've made it. And then all it is follow up, follow up, follow up.
100%. Couldn't agree more. And that's what we find. Our good franchisees all have those traits as well. So you're spot on with that assessment, Lance. So I want to leave the floor open to you. Is there anything that we haven't addressed that you might want to say to someone that's, unsure, but thinking about, can I be my own boss and get into business for myself and become a franchisee with a great model?
It's great the way you phrased the question. Is there anything else? Most people get stuck. They get stuck and they think now's not the time. Well, the reality is there's no such thing as perfect timing ever. So reach out to me. I have a free assessment. My free assessment helps me understand, based on your life experiences, your mindset, skill set, etc., what actually might be great brands for you. And that's actually very helpful in my process. But also, franchise brokers and consultants, we're free. It's the best thing in the world because we actually get paid by the brands. So whether you met me or not, you're not paying me anything. And that's concerning to some people in the early stages because they think I'm like a real estate agent. And at closing, there's a commission that they're going to pay me. No. So I am your advocate. I am going to save you time. And more importantly, I'm going to get you into the right business for you. And, I'm happy to help anybody. I love doing this. I got a call yesterday from a guy that just wanted to do a startup business of his own. He always had a dream and found my podcast and wanted to pick my brain about how to be successful. And we talked about customer service and we talked about, the attention to detail that you need, and meeting or exceeding customers' expectations. Because there's a lot of crappy businesses that start every day that truly don't need to exist.
Sure.
Franchising is safe because it's typically very much recession proof and needed, whether it's restoration or cost reduction franchises like Schoolie Mitchell. And I love doing my Schoolie Mitchell deals because you're talking about a low cost franchise, $70,000 investment. You can work from home. You essentially have no borders, and every business is looking to save money. And most businesses, as Dennis Schooley explained to me a long time ago, and I loved it, a lot of business owners know how to, get more sales and do promotions and things like that.
Right.
But most of them aren't going to invest the time in calling all of their vendors to renegotiate. And they don't even know how to start that process. So
Sure.
I love Schoolie Mitchell for that, and show Schoolie Mitchell to so many people.
Well, we love you too, Lance, and we really appreciate that, and love working with you. So, where can people find you, and where can they hear more of your thoughts? I know you have some platforms that you're sharing thoughts and evaluations of different franchise models that are out there as well.
Yeah, I'm really beefing up my YouTube. I have 3 different channels. Lance Graulich, Ion Franchising is the podcast channel, EYE on franchising, and Franchise Road Trip is my new show where I go to franchise brands. And that's a lot of fun. There's already a multitude of episodes up over there. But lancegraulich.com is my website. I'm all over social media. I'm getting traction on my TikTok. I got 90,000 views talking about my Krispy Kreme experience recently on TikTok, of all things.
Very cool. Well, I'm trying to get Dennis Schooley on TikTok, and the listeners don't know, but Lance, that would be entertaining for the watchers.
I can't wait. I love it.
All right, Lance. Well, really appreciate you joining me today on the Franchise Business Podcast. I think we'll see you soon in Las Vegas.
Absolutely.
All right. See you, Lance. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Mike.
All right.